Today we'll cover the macroscopic anatomy of a typical long bone, and the long bone that I chose here to draw was a typical humerus. Let's begin with the larger areas. The expanded ends are called the epiphyses, epiphysis for singular, and the shaft of the bone is called the diaphysis. Now we can get a little more specific, and the proximal end would be the proximal epiphysis. This will be the distal epiphysis. And actually in between, there's this region between the epiphyses and the diaphysis, which is the metaphysis, meta for the middle between them. All right, on the expanded ends, covering the epiphyses, we have the articular cartilage. And this is hyaline cartilage, and found, it's that, you know, if you think about when you eat a chicken, the opaque kind of smooth part, you know, that you maybe chew on, or it's kind of rubbery looking, that's the articular cartilage found on the ends to prevent friction within the joints. Okay, we have this outer layer here, it's green, called the periosteum. The periosteum is connective tissue, specifically it's dense, irregular connective tissue that is a covering for the bone. It's an attachment site for muscles. Also provides some of those bone cells that we talked about earlier. We have the inside region here called the medullary cavity. When we're young, that cavity is filled with marrow, red marrow, produces red blood cells, but as we get older, that red marrow is eventually converted into yellow marrow or fat, filled with fat. We have the inner lining of the marrow cavity in long bones called the endosteum. So lining here, so we have the periosteum on the outside and the endosteum lining the inner part of that bone. Okay, we have the compact bone. And we talked about the compact bone, how it's made of those individual osteons, those cylindrical structures that run the length of the compact bone. Okay. We have spongy bone here, made up of those bone spikes called trabeculae, and you can go ahead and read about the formation of the trabeculae as well as the compact bone, how it's produced and through the process called endochondral ossification. Let's see, what else do we have? We have this little red thing, this little string coming out. This is a vessel, so a nutrient artery. Because remember that bone is a living tissue. It's got vessels that supply it with nutrients, and you know, gets rid of waste through those nutrient arteries. Okay, so it's constantly changing, and it's a living tissue. And this nutrient artery enters and exits the bone through a nutrient foramina or foramen. A foramen is a hole, a round hole for vessels and nerves, and so this one provides nutrition. Let's see. Okay, on the ends of the bone, we have, maybe I'll make it a different color. Oops. We have a structure here in a adult bone. This is called the epiphyseal line, okay, which is a remnant of what used to be called the epiphyseal plate. The epiphyseal plate is the growth plate. And the growth plate is a band of cartilage that is eventually converted into bone. Now, if you recall, we all begin as our bones begin as a hyaline cartilage model. And so, the bone is initially cartilage. And through the process of endochondral ossification, which you'll have to read about, that cartilage is eventually converted into bone. But there's one last holdout of cartilage here, which is this epiphyseal plate. And when we're growing, as we're in childhood, that epiphyseal plate is where growth occurs. So they call it the growth plate. And so as long as that's cartilage, remains cartilage, we can continue to grow, and those bones can continue to grow in length. All right. Now, eventually, under the influence of hormones, that band of cartilage will eventually be completely converted into bone, and the remnant will now become epiphyseal line. And so once that occurs, then there's no more growth that can occur. All right, and so we can grow in length, but we can also grow in bone width also, and you'll have to read about the difference between those different types of growth. Let me see if I forgot anything else. All right, I think that might be it. Oh, okay, maybe I'll just mention that here. So growth along the epiphyseal line is called interstitial growth. All right, and so that's going to result in growth in lengthwise of that bone. Okay, and there's also epiphyseal line and epiphyseal plate down on this end also. Now, that growth and width of a bone is called appositional growth, and that occurs when osteoblasts in the periosteum lays down bone along the diaphysis, and so that results in an increase in width. So again, interstitial growth is an increase in length, and appositional growth is an increase in width. All right.